Morning, folks. Hope you're good. So, what I'm going to talk about today is going to go against all the conventional product-led growth wisdom that you may have heard. I wanted to actually address something that you don't hear very often these days, and namely when you should not invest in user onboarding, right? Blasphemy. Why is that? Well, in some situations, it just like when your house is on fire, you don't want to think about like redecorating your bathroom, obviously, right? You need to just leave your house as soon as possible to save your life. And there may be these life-threatening situations in your company when investing in user onboarding just doesn't make sense and may even mean you're shooting yourself in the foot because you should be really focusing on these bigger problems at hand. There are also some less serious situations where, investing in user onboarding is just flogging a dead horse and wasting your time. And I'm going to get to these in a second. So let's actually start from these less serious situations where you should not invest in user onboarding. So let's say your product is dead simple. It's so simple that your users just discover the value on their own and you don't need to take them by the hand and lead them to it. Like if there are two buttons they need to click because your product is so simple, like an interactive walkthrough that will point them to these two buttons will just save them 5 seconds of their time, or maybe even not. Maybe even it will even add 5 seconds to their startup time, so it will just frustrate them. So there are plenty of products like that that are just fine. It's not that the product is bad, but they're just so simple you instantly know how to use them. Let's take an example of the Chrome extension that helps me manage my monkey brain and do any work at all instead of watching cat videos on YouTube all day. It's called Stay Focused, and it literally consists of a couple of fields where I can input the URLs which I want to block during working hours. So yeah, now you know. It's just so simple. I don't need any explanation. Another situation like that is basically when you think user onboarding will fix your problem, when you think like this will help your users discover more value, but in fact, your retention problems don't stem from the fact that your users are not discovering value in your product. They are, but your product is simply not offering the users enough value, right? Which is why they're leaving. They're probably leaving for your competitors because they're offering them more value. So in that case, focusing on user onboarding will be just delaying the confrontation with reality and having to face the music that you just need to improve your product, right? The same applies for all the products that are buggy, that offer a terrible user experience. You guys forget about onboarding, go back to the drawing board and either pivot or, start solving real problems or start solving them well enough that your users don't want to leave. So that was the more serious situation. Another situation when you should not invest in user onboarding is when your product is an established basically product in a certain well-known category, and everybody who's signing up for your product knows exactly how to use it. Let me give you an example. A word processor, right? Do we need an explanation when we open a blank Google document how to use it? Probably not. Even if you were using Google Docs for the first time, say you have been hiding in a cave for 15 years and you just emerged and you're opening Google Docs, but you have used Microsoft Word before, you know exactly how to use Google Docs then. So having an interactive walkthrough showing you around will just insult your intelligence and, frustrate you. So don't do that if you're well-known product in an established category. Other situation, if you're the only product in your category, for instance, you offer an extremely niche product for a very, very niche audience, then your users just don't have any choice. So you may want to focus on something else like acquisition This is a risky strategy, though, because if your addressable target market is large enough for a competitor to enter, they may enter and snatch your market share with better user experience. But again, user experience does not equal user onboarding. So if you have a terrible user experience and you slap, a 20-step product tool on top, it's not going to help you in the long term. So again, you need to think if this applies to your situation and whether you need to work on user onboarding or whether you need to work on improving your user experience. Two different things, right? And now, probably, one of the most serious situations where you should definitely not invest in user onboarding is when you are not acquiring any new users. Right. And now this may go against all the PLG wisdom that you've heard, right? Retention is more important than acquisition. Well, if you want to grow and if you don't have 100% retention, then you won't have 100% retention because it's simply impossible. Some of your customers are going to close their business, move countries, or even die, and they are going to churn. Right? Some churn is just inevitable. So if you want to grow, you need to acquire new users. And even if you've heard like the famous HBR studies that retaining a customer is 5 times cheaper than acquiring a new one, all fun and games, but there's only so much you can do about account expansion. There are only so many upsells you can push. And ultimately, if you want to grow, you need to acquire new users. So if your marketing is completely broken and you're not acquiring new users, then you should address that first and only then focus on retention and user onboarding. Last but not least, sometimes you just don't want to grow and you're not pushing any new features and you already have some onboarding and your users are discovering the value of your product, but there is just nothing new going on and you don't need to build a new onboarding experiences for the new features or implement the new features into your evergreen onboarding flows simply because you don't have any new features. And well, you may freak out now. Well, if you're not building new features, then you're not going to grow. But for some companies, it's fine. In fact, some products like Coke, they don't need to change because the users like them exactly as they are. And they would be really upset if your product changed suddenly. That's why it's so risky if, products like Facebook or LinkedIn or other social media platforms change their interface because people are mostly used to the old interface and it's a huge, huge bet, right? That only really big companies can afford. So these are basically the reasons why you should not invest in user onboarding and focus on other things instead. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have self-diagnosed as someone who doesn't need user onboarding. And if you need user onboarding, hey, we have a pretty good user onboarding product that's also very, very cheap, much cheaper than hiring a developer to do that for you and much more flexible. So give us a shout, book a demo, and I will see you on the other side. Have a great rest of the week. Bye-bye.